My name is Denise. I'm co-founder of Freedom Angels. You can find us on Instagram under freedom.angels2, and our website is freedom-angels.org. So let's introduce Tara. Go ahead, Tara.
Hi, I'm Tara, also co-founder of Freedom Angels, and thanks for joining us on this space. We want to use it more because we know it's one of the good ways to get the message out, especially to legislators, and there's a lot of things that need to be discussed that really don't get the microphone or the spotlight that they need.
Yeah, so today we're going to be talking about the CDC, or I'm sorry, the California Department of Public Health quietly walking back their mandate, but we're going to get into that. We're also going to talk about ACIP, which is the Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices, adding the COVID shot to the childhood and adult schedule. Again, we like to do these spaces because people don't know the laws, they don't know about recommendations, they don't know about mandates. And so we ask that you please share this with your platform, share it with your friends, and tag your legislators below. So let's take this all the way back to 2015 when it comes to California's COVID shot mandate for children in public and private school and daycare K through 12. Tara, you want to go ahead and touch on that?
Yeah, it started with SB 277 in 2015. That was the legislation that removed the the personal belief exemption for the 10 recommended shots on the kids' childhood schedule for mandated for attendance at school in California. Originally, that bill was comply or move state. There were no carve outs in it. Through a process of trying to kill the bill, which was unsuccessful, there were a bunch of amendments added, and that is a small carve out for people on homeschool and for kids with IEPs and 504s. And that's a really important piece. Most people don't realize that kids on IEPs and 504s are fully exempt from the 10 mandated shots on the childhood schedule in California. Problem is neither your school nor your doctor will tell you that. You have to have that information, and then you have to fight for it with the school.
And let me just add that they are also exempt from needing an exemption. I know a lot of
Yeah.
parents try to take their children to the doctors to get a medical exemption, and children, again, on IEPs and 504s are exempt from needing the shots and exempt from needing the exemption.
Exactly. That's a good clarification. That is the exemption, the IAP and 504.
Yes.
So one of the pieces that bill did, besides removing the personal belief exemption, it was a very significant change. Prior to that bill, the only way to put shots on the schedule for a mandate in California for kids at school was through the legislature. That's called the stakeholder process. That's where you have a voice, representative voice. You elect people, and then you have an opportunity to vote, and then you have the opportunity to discuss with them and make your voice heard in the process for them to listen to you as their representative. What happened in 2015 with SB 277 is that bill added another avenue to be able to mandate the shots, and that is through the California Department of Public Health, CDPH. That is known as a bureaucratic or regulatory channel. It is activated at the command of the governor. And they go straight. Once a shot is put on the recommended schedule by ACIP or CDC, then CDPH can just straight put it on the childhood schedule. We have never had that pathway activated since 2015. But in October 2021, Gavin Newsom said California would be the first state in the nation to mandate the C-19 shot for kids for school, and he would do so activating the bureaucratic / regulatory channel of CDPH. This is an important part. The next piece is really important. On April 14th of 2022, CDPH announced they call it their Statement on Timeline for COVID-19 Vaccine Requirements in School. And there they stated that as an age group became the C-19 shots went from EUA to full FDA approval. For example, age 12 and up, then the shot would become mandated for that age group, which is grade 7 through 12. When it went down to full approval for 5 and up, mandate would go for kids fifth kindergarten and up. And that as that full FDA approval kicked in, the next half semester, whether it's July 1 or January 1, would be when the mandate would go in effect. So the reason why that piece is really important. Well, Denise, do you want to jump to the what we're dealing with now since January with the articles, or do you want me to go over that?
The recent CNN article.
Yeah, and EdSource.
Uh,
No, the
oh,
EdSource.
Oh, the EdSource. So I'm so sorry. There's so many articles that have come out
I
on
know.
this. So EdSource recently came out with an article stating that California is no longer going to mandate the C-19 shot because the emergency is going to end February 28th. So we're going to touch on a couple of things that were inside that statement from EdSource. So to be very clear, because of the laws of SB 277 and already allowing the California Department of Public Health to add shots to the schedule, it is not tied to an emergency. They already have the pathway to add the shot. Now, the report also stated that this could change. If there is a surge in numbers, then the California Department of Public Health will reconsider adding the shot to the mandate. And through that whole letter, there was no names, no official names or statements. I found it very strange that instead of CDPH coming out with a representative, naming the representative and saying we are no longer going to pursue a mandate, nobody has came out, no official, and Gavin Newsom has not came out and said and rescinded his orders to the CDPH. So although it feels like, yes, we defeated this mandate, the mandate's still on the table. It's still, the pathway is still there for the California Department of Public Health to add it. And if there is a surge, then Gavin Newsom's orders towards CDPH is not going to change. You want to add, Tara?
Yeah, and exactly. So everyone knows the CDPH channel through the governor, it stands no matter what, whether there's a state of emergency or not. They can activate it at any time. They have never done so before this October 1, 2021. The other piece, as Denise brought up, this article is, officials at CDPH said, okay, well, what officials? And where is it in writing? Where is the official public announcement and statement from both Newsom and the CDPH that are rescinding this regulatory mandate that they have essentially still on record? So it's just it's very misleading in that way. I do think it's a quiet way, but it's not a clear way or a sure way. We always say, like, until it's officially in writing, it hasn't happened. And we, Freedom Angels, made an official request regarding the current COVID C-19 regulatory mandate for kids for school. And that was for Newsom to make a official public announcement rescinding, 2, for the official public statement also to come from CDPH. And then 3, this goes back to that April 14th, 2022 statement from CDPH on the timeline for the requirement in school, is what happens when CDPH when they change the guidance on something. They put a marker on it. And as of yesterday, haven't looked today, but as of yesterday, they still have not updated that statement with the appropriate language, which would state, and I have this in quotes because this is what it says: this guidance is no longer in effect and is for historical purposes only. Until that happens, that guidance of April 14th, 2022, which states as soon as these things go to full FDA approval for a certain age, that still stands. So this is why we want the official public position, and we want to see that mark on there, say with the appropriate language stating the guidance is no longer in effect and for historical purposes. It's really important that people understand that, like Denise said, about possible surges. This pathway exists right now, and so they can activate it at any time, separate from emergencies. And secondly, when is a, as in a framework in perspective, in 2015, when the personal belief exemption was removed for children in California to go to school, there was only 2% of the population of school kids that were using that exemption, across, if you averaged it across the state. And in 2019 with SB 276, where the medical exemptions were removed, the broad medical exemption was removed to a standard so narrow, functionally no one qualifies. That was for only a subset, closer to like 0.1% of the population were using it. If and this is important information, because the other piece that we didn't discuss yet is that in that battle of SB 277 in 2015, we, like I said earlier, we didn't defeat the bill, but we got key amendments added in. And one of them was if they did use that channel, the bureaucratic regulatory channel of CDPH, that there was a personal belief exemption available if it goes outside of the stakeholder process. So right now, as it stands, if Newsom and CDPH mandate the C-19 shot, if they make it the 11th shot mandated for kids in school in California, there is a current personal belief exemption for that. If it goes to the state legislature, that exemption does not exist. You'd be like you would with the existing 10 with no exemptions. But if it goes through CDPH and Newsom, there will be the personal belief exemption attached, which is what we added as an amendment in 2015. It's two things to think about with that. One is, last year, Senator Pan brought a bill called SB 871, and that was the bill where he tried to get the C-19 shot added through the legislature as the 11th shot. That bill was quickly pulled back from blowback, inside and outside the legislature. And the second part of that bill, most people don't know, was that it stated also that it would remove the personal belief exemption to any shots added through through CDPH. So the idea has always been and will always be, from the extremists, to remove all functional exemptions. So even though this one stands now, there is, there will always be extremists on the perennial, agenda to remove those. So what could likely happen is, if CDPH and Newsom do go through with a mandate at some point through that channel, the PBE would be attached, and you can bet that there'll be far more than 0.1 or 2% of the population using that personal belief exemption for the shot. And what you will see then is a huge media and agenda campaign to say, we cannot have that, we've got to remove that exemption and bring it into compliance with all the other 10 shots, and then there will be functionally no exemption for it.
And it's really important to know that the school districts and schools do not have the ability or the power to add a shot to the schedule. So when we're talking about exemptions, do not put an exemption on file if your school tells you that it's necessary. The courts have already struck it down. There's only two ways in the state of California that it can be put on the schedule for children to go to school. So, and we all know how hard it is to get any type of medical exemption here. And again, like Tara said, they're functionally unavailable now. And so let's go from CDPH's power, that could allow to add the shot, to how this even happens. So the Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices is a committee, an arm of the CDC. That committee decides what shots are going to go on the schedule. It's a recommendation, and then the CDC adopts it. Now, it's really important because, again, parents and people don't really know that just because it's a recommendation does not mean it's a mandate. So their recommendation is a recommendation to all the states to say, we recommend you add this to the childhood schedule to go to school. and then it's up to each state to adopt that recommendation. So the ACIP has meetings 3 times a year. They had one in October, and they just recently had one in January. And they have they've already said it. They are recommending this series, this COVID shot series, to go onto the schedule for children and adults. I think a lot of adults aren't realizing that their decision also affects their schedule. So let's go through that one, Tara.
Yeah, there's really two big main pieces to that, I would say. One is the reason why they put this on the schedule like that is it removes liability. Why they put it recommended onto their recommended schedule. It removes liability. It gives them the same protections that there are under the 86 Act. So it moves these shots that are currently protected under the PrEP Act into this long-standing immunity shield for the manufacturers and everyone in the chain of production, distribution, and implementation of them. So that's a really big thing. So it's a liability shield. And the second thing, the reason why it's so significant that these things become recommended via ACIP and CDC is because that's the foundation through which everyone points to say, we have to mandate it. We're going to mandate it. Whether
Right.
it's
We
a
follow
school,
CDC guidelines, right?
yep, yes, and it's really important that there's two big ways that they're going to get this, and adults need to be aware of this because this is where they're going to be most affected is not necessarily in the school setting, but in the settings around healthcare. And so that's their first line of mandating, whether it's your employment in a healthcare delivery system or it's your access to it. And one of the big issues that I have have dealt with 6 years ago, is through the veterans community. They have tried to attach veterans benefits,
Yep.
medical benefits in particular, to compliance with the recommended CDC adult schedule. So, there's been very few eyes on this. Back 6 years ago, there was a big federal bill attaching this. And originally it was a veterans' rights bill. And then Big Pharma came in and tried to attach that piece in. And there was just no eyes on it. Now that we have a lot more eyes on this issue, I hope we can beat that stuff back. But this is why it's significant that ACIP and CDC have put these on schedules because on the recommended list.
Well,
Because
yeah, and it affects everything and everybody. Anytime that we've heard we follow CDC guidelines, that
Mhm.
includes, after school programs, it includes camps, it includes sports, everything that your children attend to that's a public entity. Usually, as we saw through the whole COVID lockdowns, was everybody was saying we follow CDC guidelines. So even if you don't send your child to public school, like Tara said, if you need to access healthcare, if you need to access extra activities for your family, they're all going to follow CDC guidelines. So, their recommendation isn't a mandate, but it creates the foundation for mandates. And it allows people a scapegoat to say, sorry, CDC says that we need to do this, and this is just the way it is. And so that's why it is so important. Even if California said, "Oh, we're not going to mandate it," if it's not in writing, it didn't happen, and it's already a foundation laid out to allow the states to do this. It is so important that people engage in politics, know what the laws are, know who your reps are, and make sure that they know who you are. I know here in California, we've been doing a lot of boots on the ground work for years, and continue to do grassroots training and advocacy. Now is the time, especially in California, since we don't have a bill yet, to start engaging and contacting your reps, letting them know that you do not support mandates for our children or for our workers, because this affects adults too. We saw it with AB 1993 that got pulled back in 2022, which mandated workers in the state of California would have to be vaccinated with the COVID shot in order to have employment in this state. And so a lot of people forget about, the kids. Oh, kids need to have shots to go to school. But this again, they've added it to the adult schedule. So this is going to affect everybody, just not one demographic.
Yeah, and that's why it's so critical to start to build relationships. Like there, at any moment or any time is always, it's get in there, build them at the hyper local level in your district with your state legislators, assembly and senators, because this agenda is still moving, even if there's not a forward advance of a bill. When Denise just talked about AB 1993, that's by Assemblyman Evan Lowe. He is still there, and he is one of, if not the leading, he's one of the leading vaccine mandate advocates in the state. If anyone remembers Lorena Gonzalez, Assemblywoman who is Senator Pan's cohort in advancing the vaccine extremist agenda, she left recently, this last year, the assembly to lead the California Labor Federation, to take the position of president. That is the largest labor union federation in the United States. There's 21 districts and several thousand unions represented to it, and you can bet that her agenda is to move mandates through there. That has been one of her passions, and she is not going to stop. And then when you have people like Evan Lowe in there, this is how they start to advance and move pieces of legislation. If you have built relationships, and if the legislators understand at the district and state level that there will be extreme blowback and that they're not supported in this, that's how we prevent them from allowing these things to take root and further. And right now we're standing pretty well in California, off after the historic defeat of SB 866 last year.
Yeah, and when people think California is done for and it's just too extreme and there's no way we can fix it, we have experienced being able to defeat a bill so extreme like SB 866, which is being introduced in Maryland, not 866, but the idea of it to allow minors to consent to all shots without parental consent or knowledge. We ex- we expect that we're going to continue to see movement, but we were able to defeat that bill last year because of the blowback that representatives were getting at a local district level. We can change the trajectory of the state. We just have to start participating in what's going on. And again, I started off with this. One of the reasons why these bills pass is because nobody knows about them. Nobody knows about how mandates are different than recommendations. Nobody knows how the laws affect them. And it's really up to the legislators to have town hall meetings to discuss with their community what bills they're seeing come across their desk. And it's really important that these legislators understand how to identify these types of bills as well. So that's why it's important when we say build relationships, it's making sure that your legislator knows who you are, right? The most important thing that we can do, what we found in defeating SB 866, is the pressure at a local district level works. You have to know who your legislator is, and if you don't know who your legislator is, you can go to findyourrep.legislature.ca.gov. You punch in your address and it tells you who your reps are. Reach out to them via phone call or email and let them know that you're concerned about mandates in the state and you would like to have a meeting. This can know they went way too far with all the information coming out, with all the data coming out, and they continue to press these mandates on us. It's only going to stop when we get involved and we stop it.
Oh, 100%. Um, and it's really 1, 2, 10 people in a district can have such a transformative effect that it's worth every effort of engagement. And one of the things that we make it really clear when there's, more and more people each day coming forward, asking for the information and how to learn and how to be more effective and engaging. And it really does matter, because the thing that you see when you start to engage, that if you're not doing it, nobody else is. We are the cavalry on this, and it's in our hands. And with just, this, ever growing networks and up leveling our effectiveness and connectedness on this stuff, that's how we're going to advance the protections and the course correct that we're all seeking and create the world we want for our children. And it's been there's a really good moment right now in California. The extremists really kind of exposed themselves last year, and when we on 866, and we were able to really show that, most of the state is aligned on protecting parental rights and against the forced medical emancipation of kids and against, parental alienation. And so I do hope that Maryland and the other states that are trying to advance these things, that they can, look at some of the successes from California and some other places, but particularly California, because it was fresh and new and it's the worst of terrain to battle in for 866, and see how, that there is hope that they can do this, that they can turn this around. Because if we can do it in California, they can do it in any state. New
Yeah.
York's bad too, but our two states are the worst of the worst.
Yeah. So if you're in a comfortable state that isn't mandating anything right now, you still have to be engaged and involved and make sure it doesn't happen in your state. What California and New York is, it's a warning to the whole nation of what can happen if you allow government to get out of control. And that's the way it is here. There's time for some course correct happening. There's time for engagement, and that is something that Freedom Angels does. Is we do boots on the ground training and how to be effective in politics. We just had a really great day, February 7th at the California Capitol, where people were showing up to advocate for families, for children, and we walked people through this. Again, I wish schools would teach civic engagement, but unfortunately they don't. And so now
Mhm.
it's up to us. It's up to us to learn how to do this. It is up to us to engage, especially this year. Just it really makes me nervous because it's so quiet right now. So I, it's like kids. Like, what are they doing? It's way too quiet. So start participating in politics. Start engaging. We will always update our page with events and calls to action. So please, thank you again for following us on Twitter at Freedom Angels 2, and you can reach us at freedom-angels.org. Tara, you want to say anything before we head off?
Yeah, just stay paying attention. We've got some pending strategies that are going to help train and support the generals on the ground doing this work. And by the generals on the ground, that's any person willing to engage to protect human civil rights, children, parental rights, all of it.
All right. Well, thanks for listening. We'll be back next week. Bye.
Bye.